I might, Owen, maybe start with you. More than 12 billion down, but we're still standing.
Yeah, I mean, it's remarkable in many ways, and you called it a once-in-a-lifetime pandemic, and hopefully it is a once-in-a-lifetime, and I know you're interviewing Luke O'Neill shortly, and hopefully he confirms that, or at least at least we can
you
live.
Might want to get a new keynote speaker then.
At least we can learn to live alongside COVID, because I think for the last couple of years, we in the travel, tourism, hospitality sector have been hardest hit by the pandemic. We were closed, we were shuttered. You heard it there on the VT. Business effectively was closed. We wouldn't have survived but for government support and but for the domestic market. So if there is a sort of re-emergence of the pandemic, I think the key thing is that the industry is allowed to stay open, albeit with certain limitations, but we have to be allowed trade.
So what are some of the key metrics that you're looking at, I suppose, just going into the next period of the recovery?
Well, just hot off the press, I'll just show you sort of our recalibrated, if you like, tourism projections for the next few years. And I'm kind of wary even about using the word projections, because, I prefer to call them scenarios, because there's so many variables out there. You mentioned it, whether it's Ukraine, whether it's the cost of inflation, whether it's labour shortages and so on. There's a lot of kind of supply side issues that might put a handbrake on growth. But I mentioned 60% in the VT. We've actually recalibrated the numbers, and we're estimating now about a 67% recovery in visitor numbers this year, which would be no bad achievement at all. And that's volume. It's difficult to put kind of handle on revenue, as you can imagine. But full recovery is still 4 or 5 years away. It's probably 2026 before we see a full recovery in our sector, such has been the devastating shock within tourism. And just a word on our sustainable tourism industry report, which you mentioned at the outset. It's up on our website. This is a flagship report. It's something we've done in association with AIB. And I think, I suppose to put in context the environmental challenge that is there. This is the climate action plan that the government have laid out, published late last year. It calls for a 51% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2030, which is just around the corner, and of course net zero by 2050. So they're hugely challenging, particularly in the context of an industry which up to now has been on its knees and wants to recover a lot of lost ground. So our report looked at that, looked at crucially the metrics that need to be put in place, and also put in place a kind of a series of recommendations that we think need to be there to enable the industry to meet those targets, because there's a lot of will, there's a lot of good efforts and good intentions, but I think some of the heavy lifting we need support from government to help us do that, but we're certainly up for the challenge.
That's brilliant. I might bring you in, Kathy, just on that, because obviously, along with sustainability and recovery, the other big buzzword is competitiveness, I guess. What trends are you seeing, or what's coming through for you at this stage?
Yeah, well, I think first of all to recognise the fantastic achievement of the industry to get through what was an unbelievable crisis, and I want to thank everybody in the room. We obviously bank the sector significantly. It's so important to the Irish economy, but I think the innovation and the resilience of the sector over the last 2 years has been phenomenal. We have to, of course, remain competitive, and there are opportunities out there, but also challenges around inflation in particular, I think, is what we're seeing this year. Sustainability also remaining challenged. Colin's going to speak a lot about that later on, so I won't hog that topic.
And what kind of trends are you seeing, within the market in terms of acquisitions, reference new builds, or, kind of the major kind of Dublin metropolitan region versus regional areas in general?
Yeah, well, look, I liked those figures from Owen. I'd quite like to take them back to my credit committee and show them. I would have taken them 18 months ago. So we certainly hope to see that. I think, last year we saw the regional hotels fare better, I think, than the Dublin hotels. And that challenge continues, because while visitor numbers are up, and Rob's it's great to hear that American travellers are certainly back for his business. I think the business travel is going to take longer, and we recognise that, and that probably impacts on the Dublin hotels more. On the regional front, and I suppose just generally, domestic demand is very strong. I mean, we know in our business that people, have spent or pent up spending power. And I believe the wedding market is incredibly strong this year. Hopefully, as a lot of you in the room are going to benefit from that.
So is there strong support, I suppose, for Capital X funding applications then? Is there strong support for lending for CapEx projects?
Yeah, I mean, we want to support, particularly hotels looking to move to a more sustainable footing, and that is going to require investment. But we are also financing acquisitions in the market, and that is surprisingly active actually in the last few months.
But probably very little on the new build front, given everything else that's going on in the world of
less new build. And I think probably Dublin won't see that much, other than what is already in the pipe, won't see much more activity in the short term, is our feeling.
Rob, you were doing sustainability way before it was cool and way before it became so mainstream, but how important is the sustainability aspect of the recovery, and is it becoming more mainstream?
Yeah, it definitely is. I mean, I think it's much more than just a buzzword. It is here to stay, and I think it's not necessarily something to shy away from. I mean, obviously we have some huge challenges with sustainability, particularly on climate change, and we have to recognise that, and we have to recognise the negative impacts. But I think we also have to recognise the positive impacts of tourism. And that's very much part of sustainability as well. So the wealth generation, as mentioned, the indigenous jobs, the wealth distribution around the country, the positive effect it can have on local communities, social interaction and cultural interaction, and even the impact it can have, say, on the peace process in the north. So we have to recognise the bad, but we also have to focus on the good as well. Because in the next 20 years, we have to be seen to be sustainable, because people are going to be making choices about whether tourism is too dirty. So we have to make sure that it's clean and people can still afford to have a great experience when they travel.
And is that pressure kind of coming from both consumers or our staff, our employees also driving that kind of, I suppose, the drive for sustainability?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think it's coming from both. It's coming from consumers, very much so. It's very much coming down the tracks from corporate travel as well, and incentive travel. If people are sending their employees abroad for travel, they want to make sure that it's as green as possible. But I totally agree on the employee side as well. People nowadays want to work for a company with a bit of purpose and with green credentials. And I've certainly seen it recruiting this year for our team. That all the successful candidates have all mentioned our green credentials when they come for interview. Now, they could just be blowing smoke in an interview, but I don't think they are. I think they're being genuine, and I think it's made a huge difference for us. And you see it with various businesses around Ireland as well. Those that really do put sustainability front and centre, I think they're attracting a high calibre of candidate.
The scale of the crisis internationally demands huge, big gestures, and I think sometimes, having spoken to a lot of SMEs, they're quite intimidated around they want to go on the sustainability journey if they're not already on it, but it's actually the thought of very big or capital intensive gestures. How can they do that in, I suppose, as we said in the report, in both an economically or environmentally as well as an economically sustainable way?
Well, I mean, a lot of stuff you do to make a business more sustainable is small things. So obviously you reduce your energy consumption, your waste and your water consumption. A lot of it really is small, and a lot of it doesn't really involve much investment. But I know what you mean. It all seems to be, because it's a global problem, it's a little bit overwhelming. But if we all just make small changes in the way we go about our own business and our own lives, then over a period of time, it does make a big difference. So I see where you're coming from, and it's a bit hard to know where to start. And again, I suppose that's when you go and get some professional advice and and work from there. But it really isn't. It's not rocket science. It's good for business. Your business will become more profitable. Your staff will be more engaged, and it is a win-win, really.
And Kathy's nodding furiously in agreement there.
Yeah.
Well, maybe just to come in, I mean, we recognise what Rob is saying. I think he's right. I mean, it's all about starting. It can be a little bit daunting. We are working as a group to help with SME measures, and we're hoping to bring out new tools later in the year, and obviously then also credit products which have an incentive for people who do invest in sustainability. We call them sustainability-linked loans. So, it's about putting all of these things together to get a better opportunity for SMEs.
And can I just ask you, Rob, obviously there's so many facets of the sustainability debate, and obviously one of the big ones is carbon, and that obviously gets so much of the attention. I recently heard a question asked, and I thought it was interesting, are we fixated with carbon, or is even that a bit of a controversial question to ask?
Yeah, there is the phrase, the carbon tunnel. People just get tunnel vision, and it's all they focus on in regards to sustainability. It's all about carbon. And there's absolutely no doubt that it is something we have to address. I suppose for small businesses like ourselves, we are generating a demand for people to fly, to visit the country, which is obviously burning carbon. It's about a ton of carbon for one person to fly backwards and forwards across the Atlantic. But there's not necessarily something my business can do about that on a daily basis. So, we know the airlines are working on sustainable aviation fuel and cleaner engines and more efficient engines. There are things you can do about, a different type of travel, a slower travel, a higher quality of travel as well, where people stay in destination longer and contribute more to the local economies. So there's lots of things you can do to address it. Long term, we do need to deal with it, but at the same time, we do, as I said, need to focus on the positives. Otherwise, we're just going to get down a rabbit hole of carbon.
Kathy, can I ask you to what extent, and we're going to be talking a lot about it today, I'm sure, the staff, recruitment, retention, skills, supply, those, I suppose, facets of the current phase of the recovery, to what extent is that feeding in terms of the businesses that you're dealing with? Is that a difficulty, Kathy, the staff retention and recruitment?
Undoubtedly it's a challenge out there. I mean, one of our customers said to me recently that they had closed a whole portion of rooms in some of their hotels. So it's clearly because they couldn't clean the rooms. So having said that, I think with the reduction in the government supports, hopefully things will normalise a little bit over the coming months. And look, I think staffing is a challenge right across every industry in Ireland at the moment. So right throughout our customer base, and us as an employer are finding it challenging. So.
Oh, and I've become an avid Liveline listener since working from home, so I'm very tuned in. But anyone who listened yesterday to a restaurateur from Donegal just talking about her experience of having to shut down a business, the pressures on all sorts of businesses, but particularly in hospitality and even in restaurants, is still very, very challenging.
Yeah,
there were several people who rode in behind that Lady Linda Doyle yesterday.
It's interesting because previous crises, the issue has always been demand. But we have lots of demand now. You've seen it. You can see it in terms of the carriers, the airlines, and the ferry companies. They've put on lots of capacity because there's huge pent-up demand, and there's kind of more consumer confidence out there that the worst of COVID is behind us and we can learn to live through it. So a lot of the issues now are supply. And you're right about labour shortages.
Then she talked about the price of chicken had gone up by something like 70 to 80%.
Yeah, and even that's the inflationary costs, and that is worrying in terms of Ireland's value for money proposition. But in terms of labour shortages, one of the things we have to recall, I think Fáilte Ireland had a recent figure out that there's about 40,000 vacancies within tourism and hospitality at the moment, and Ireland is at full employment. So how are we going to fill those vacancies? And a lot of it is actually through EU workers or indeed non-EU workers. So I think it's incumbent on government to assist in terms of recruitment roadshows overseas and also fast-tracking work visas and permits. Just on the sustainability issue, just one point. Rob is dead right. It's multifaceted. So you have economic, but you also have social and obviously environmental. And I think they all have to coexist, and that's the huge challenge. And in terms of the environmental stuff, Rob is dead right in terms of businesses can make small changes which actually have a real and material impact. But on some of the big ticket items, there is funding there. There's a government scheme called the Just Transition Fund, which the Minister would know all about. It's in the Climate Action Plan, and that's all the carbon levies that will be applied in coming years. And up to 2030, that's worth about €9.5 billion. And that's there to assist industry and society and businesses actually make the leap to a more carbon-friendly and more carbon mitigation environment. And tourism, like every other sector, should be able to apply to that and should be able to draw down funds to allow it to do some of the big ticket items.
Quickly before Luke O'Neill devastates your scenario planning there, the helicopter money the government supports can't be there forever. They have to be tailored, they have to come to an end. What are you hopeful for in the National Tourism Recovery Plan to assist businesses get to the next stage?
Well, I just think it's worth, I mean, we're back up and running, which is fantastic. This time last year we had a virtual conference, you remember, we were in the middle of a lockdown.
I'll never forget it.
Yeah, we were in the middle of a lockdown. I think Luke was there as well, and we had to get special permission to actually travel beyond 2 kilometres from our home to the studio, all this sort of stuff. We're now up again, we're trading, but recovery is a long way away. It's probably 2026 before we'll get back to 2019 levels. And I just think it's important that, you know, we know that, it's important that government know that, it's important that, if you like, media know it, that just because there's positive news stories about being back open for business and we hear about labour shortage and stuff, that doesn't mean all our problems are over. It will take some time. We need government to stay the course. So that means pro-business, pro-tourism policies. It means deferring the VAT increase schedule for later in the year. It means maintaining tourism investment. Those are all critical aspects to allow us as an industry recover to where we were, because I'm like a broken record on this, but we're the largest Indigenous industry the country has. We're the biggest regional employer. There's no other sector that can provide jobs in Donegal, in Mayo, in Kerry. You know, those places, tourism is the economic driver. So, you know, we as an industry have got to deliver, but also we have to do it in a sustainable manner, and we need government support to do that.
Superb. Okay, well, Owen, Cathy and Rob, I'll let you go for now. Thank you very, very much.